In 1967, a German went through the security check at Beijing airport. Strangely, his bag was full of dusty and dirty clothes. Suddenly, several policemen surrounded him, and the dust contained the top secret of our country's nuclear weapons. On the morning of November 16, 1967, a German hurried to Beijing Capital International Airport, preparing to take a plane back home. He walked quickly and came to the airport security checkpoint, where the staff signaled him to open his luggage for inspection. The German opened the bag with some reluctance. What made the security inspectors particularly puzzled was that the bag of this well-dressed foreigner was filled with dirty and dusty coats, sweaters, and socks. A new fur hat, in particular, was very dusty, as were the two handkerchiefs. The security staff felt that it was too unusual, so they asked the German to stay at the security check and not to walk around. After a while, several police officers rushed out to surround the Germans, and then controlled them. Why would a foreigner bring so much dirty laundry back home? And why is he being controlled by the police? In 1966, Lanzhou Chemical Industry Co., Limited engaged in a very important construction project, part of which was undertaken by Lurgi, a famous chemical engineering company in West Germany. Lanzhou Chemical has imported a batch of equipment from Lurgi, and a group of West German experts and technical support personnel have also come to Lanzhou to provide after-sales support for the Chinese company. On October 15, a West German named Lutz von Schuderling was sent to Lanzhou by Luke Company, and his position was an equipment unpacking inspector. That is to say, the equipment shipped from West Germany needs to be unpacked and checked for confirmation under the witness of him and Chinese personnel. This job is easy and enjoyable. Not long after arriving in Lanzhou, Su Delen began to run around in Lanzhou under the name of visiting exotic scenery. He often drives vehicles to sightseeing places such as Baida Mountain in the urban area. In fact, Baida Mountain can overlook the anti-aircraft artillery positions of our army. He even went fishing by the Yellow River for a day, and went to the countryside. Regardless of the translator's repeated dissuasion, he climbed up to the peak of Jifutai Mountain and took a shot on the mountain. On the other side of the mountain was another anti-aircraft artillery position of our army. Su Delen's whereabouts became more and more suspicious. Once, when he returned to his residence by car, he actually took pictures of a convoy of military vehicles heading west. When returning from Lanzhou Chemical Industry to the expert building, a dormitory prepared by Lanzhou Chemical Industry for foreign experts, he secretly photographed passing trucks many times. His unusual behavior was reported to the public security by an interpreter. The public security department believed that Su Delen might be stealing national defense secrets, so they stepped up their surveillance on him. However, according to the information from the waiter in the expert building, this Su Delen has a very strange living habit. He seems to be very sloppy on purpose, and he usually doesn't wash his dirty inner and outer clothes, and piles them in the closet, but when he goes out to play, he likes to wipe the dust on the floor with a clean handkerchief so that he can sit down and rest. But he never asked the waiter to wash the dusty handkerchief. Su Delen's eccentricity made the public security officers very confused, and they couldn't figure out what kind of medicine the German was selling in his ward. On August 17, Su Delen received a letter from West Germany, which came from Frankfurt. The sender wrote in the letter, "You can pack and bring back the clothes you have no time to wash, and I can wash them for you. Please do as I say." The signer is Margaret Denzel, a public security officer. It was learned through secret channels that the sender was actually the female secretary of Gaubert, the head of the U.S. intelligence agency in West Germany. Only then did the scouts know that Su Delen had a connection with the U.S. intelligence agencies. Su Delen replied quickly, "Thank you very much, I accept your opinion." The scouts were even more puzzled, but it wasn't long before they found clues. It turned out that in February, a British citizen was about to return home with 2 live rats, but was stopped by security personnel at Guangzhou Baiyun Airport. After testing, it was found that these 2 mice had radioactive materials on their bodies, which was almost the same as the data of radioactive materials in my country's nuclear bases. The British wanted to transport the rats back to the UK to test the radioactive materials on them so as to find out the composition of the Chinese nuclear weapons. But at the airport, the British man revealed his secrets and was arrested by the Chinese police, but the British man also had contact with Su Delen. Through analysis and bold speculation, the scouts believed that the German was also here for the atomic bomb. Lanzhou is close to China's nuclear test base, and there are many radioactive substances in the dust floating after the nuclear test. As long as the dust can be collected and brought back to the United States, American experts will be able to detect top secrets such as the radioactive material composition, yield and explosive power of China's nuclear weapons from the dust. Then this also makes sense, why Sue Dillon is unwilling to wash the clothes, because these clothes are covered with radioactive dust. Even if they are brought back to the country in the luggage, no one will doubt it. He could then turn the dust over to U.S. intelligence agencies. After China's first atomic bomb exploded in 1964, the United States was shocked and restless, and tried every means to obtain information about China's nuclear weapons. In addition to sending high-altitude reconnaissance planes for frequent reconnaissance, they also sent many spies to spy on and steal information from various aspects in an attempt to master the secrets of China's nuclear weapons. And Sue Dillon is a descendant of a German fascist general. The U.S. intelligence agency bought him with a lot of money and got him the status of an equipment unpacking inspector at Lurgy Company. After Sue Dillon arrived in Lanzhou, he began to carry out espionage activities on a large scale. Transportation, geography, industrial layout, and weather conditions were all within the scope of his reconnaissance. Even the fishing rod he used for fishing was a special river water measuring instrument. In addition, he also collected top-secret content such as China's atomic energy research and Lanzhou's important military fortifications. After Sue Dillon was arrested at the Beijing airport, a large number of shredded microfilms were found in his suitcase. After splicing them together, our scouts discovered that they were actually topographical maps of our nuclear industry base. At the same time, a 72-page intelligence report was found. Sue Dillon wrote all the information in capital letters connected together without punctuation marks or sentence breaks, but our scouts still saw through it. Especially the dusty, dirty clothes in his luggage. The composition of radioactive materials in the dust is the same as that of my country's nuclear industry base. There is no doubt that Sue Dillon is a West German American spy. According to Chinese law, Sue Dillon was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the crime of endangering China's national security. Those who offend China will be punished even if they are far away. It has long been known that the U.S. Navy has 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. Relying on its own strength, the U.S. Navy has appeared in various sensitive waters under the guise of free navigation. It was once regarded as one of the most unstable factors in the world. It must be admitted that the strength of the U.S. Navy is indeed the strongest in the world. After all, 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers are enough to crush all countries. Moreover, the comprehensive strength and deterrence of an aircraft carrier formation is completely comparable to the military power of a medium-sized country. So someone asked, is there no way to stop the attack of 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers in the United States? In fact, the U.S. aircraft carrier is also at risk of being sunk. The U.S. military has reported that due to continuous innovation in global technology and the emergence of advanced weapons, the U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier is also facing a huge threat. A large number of carrier busters have emerged around the world. At present, Russia has developed the Pioneer, Dagger, and Zircon hypersonic missiles, all of which are called Carrier Nemesis. These missiles are so fast that the U.S. air defense system cannot effectively intercept them. The original intention of the development of the Zircon hypersonic missile is to anti-ship, and it can be launched by sea-based, land-based, and other methods, which can effectively destroy the U.S. aircraft carrier. Even high-level officials in the United States have stated that even the most advanced nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Ford cannot withstand the attack of hundreds of anti-ship missiles. However, at present, there are very few countries in the world that have mastered the technology of developing hypersonic missiles. Could it be said that all 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers in the United States are dispatched, and all countries can only be beaten? In fact, our country has already figured out a coup, and even Russia is full of praise. Our country has developed a sea mine, which can not only deter and attack aircraft carriers, but also has a low cost. Experts believe that compared to other anti-ship weapons, the concealment and lethality of sea mines are better. However, traditional sea mines can only wait for the enemy to find them. This sea mine developed by our country can actively find the location of the aircraft carrier through the detection system, and launch an offensive against it. If a large number of mines appear at the same time, the U.S. aircraft carrier will not dare to act rashly. According to Russian media reports quoted by Observer.com, the Russian natural gas giant Novatek is likely to have chosen China Shipbuilding Industry Corporation Guangdong Gas Turbine in Harbin, China, for the company's ongoing construction of the Arctic LNG-2 liquefied natural gas project. Powered by. Sources revealed that Novatek is expected to soon introduce about 20 GT25000 gas turbine development models with a standalone power of about 25 megawatts produced by Longjiang Guangdong. The outside world believes that this may be a sign that China-made gas turbines will open up the international market. As a major energy exporter, Russia's natural gas industry is very mature, but there are obvious shortcomings in some of their fields, such as gas turbines. Although Russia was also a powerhouse of engines before, due to the perennial economic sluggishness, its independent production capacity is declining. In the past, their gas turbines can be imported from Ukraine or the United States. After the Ukrainian crisis, it is naturally impossible for Ukraine to export to them, and Western countries also targeted Russia's weakness for targeted attacks. The Russian natural gas giant originally reached a cooperation agreement with Baker Hughes of the United States, agreeing that the American company would provide them with 20 75-megawatt class LM9000 gas turbines, but Baker Hughes refused to continue to perform the contract after delivering 4. That's why Russian companies are looking for substitutes everywhere. Afterwards, Russia also contacted some suppliers. For example, they proposed a customized floating power station to a Turkish company, but the two parties could not reach an agreement on many conditions. After that, Russia turned its attention to China. According to sources, some agreements have been reached with China. According to Russian media reports, there are 3 production lines included in Russia's Arctic LNG-2, one of which will be put into production this year, and the remaining 2 are expected to be put into production next year and the year after. More detailed news is still uncertain. However, it can be basically confirmed that the first 2 production lines will be provided by Chinese companies, and a gas turbine unit made in China has already started working. In fact, the GT25000 gas turbine has quite a relationship with Russia. Russian experts pointed out that the GT25000 is derived from the UGT25000 imported from Ukraine in the last century, and the UGT25000 was almost used by the Soviet Union on the 4th-generation naval vessels. On the basis of UGT25000, China has improved and developed the GT25000, which can not only be used on warships, but also be used as land-based fixed facilities. The more widely known use of GT25000 is undoubtedly the main source of power for China's 10,000-ton destroyer 055. According to relevant information, the engines of the 055 large drive are 4 GT25000 gas turbines. This also proves from the side that it is a very wise decision for Russia to choose China this time. Not only has it allowed them to successfully break through the Western blockade again, but at the same time, Russian warships also have backup options. Multiple choices. In the future, Russia's energy transformation strategy and natural gas transportation will benefit a lot, and the level of cooperation between China and Russia will also go further. For our country, it is also of great significance. Not only have we obtained a huge order, but more importantly, this means that China's high-end equipment has begun to enter overseas markets. China's gas turbine technology has reached the world's leading level and has successfully broken through. We have solved many world-class problems and built a complete industrial chain. The excellent performance in the Russian project will attract us more partners and truly achieve win-win cooperation. It is said that World War II was the worst life experience in Western Europe. Almost all countries were affected by the flames of war, and there were ruins everywhere. For the European countries in the vortex of war, this war is far from winning or losing, it can only be regarded as a tragedy. Because whether it was Germany, Italy, which was defeated and surrendered, or Britain, France, which was the victorious country, their families were exhausted by the war. Western Europe used to be the center of the world and dominated the global development order. However, iron still needs to be hard on its own, and only strength can support ambition. Now that Europe does not have the support of strong strength, it is naturally impossible to continue its status. So Europe fell, the United States was full, and the United States, which had been waiting for many years on the other side of the ocean, finally ushered in a great opportunity to replace it. In fact, doing politics is doing business, buying at low prices and selling at high prices. The United States chose to enter the market to buy bottom when Western Europe was at its weakest, and naturally it would be very smooth. They have Bretton Woods in their left hand and Marshall economy in their right hand. They exchanged the gold they earned from Europeans for dollars, and generously distributed them to Western European countries to develop their economies. They called it European Renaissance. This trick came out of sheep, which made Americans famous and rich. It can be called Qin Shi Huang, eating pepper. Of course, this is not the end. The United States did not come to Europe for charity. Behind their crazy spending of money, taking over Western Europe is the real purpose. After all, as the saying goes, if you are short-handed and soft-handed, even if the Western European countries are unwilling, they can't refuse the gold masters bargain hunting in Western Europe this time. In 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was established in the United States, marking the official binding of Western Europe and North America. Since then, relying on this banner, the United States has logically established a military supervision system for Western Europe. At that time, the Western European countries were full of American garrisons and training bases. Among them, the headquarters of NATO is located in Paris, France. Backed by a big tree to enjoy the shade, the establishment of NATO has great positive significance for the national defense and security of Western European countries. Not only can it resist the huge pressure from the Soviet Union, but it can also prevent the Germans from making a comeback. At the same time, however, this also puts the defense system of Western Europe in the hands of the United States. I am fish and meat, and people are swordsmen. Since the establishment of NATO, Western Europe has to rely on the United States for every word and deed, and there is no longer any talk of autonomy and independence. After all, there is no free feast in the world. Since people are under the eaves, their posture must be low. Let's put it this way, as long as the old Americans raise their arms, even if the war is not in Western Europe, they have to hurry up and pay for others. Otherwise, on the Korean battlefield, how could the United States fiddle with the United Nations army of 16 countries? Therefore, not all Western European countries are willing to be the younger brothers of the United States, especially France, which once liberated the United States. Although France was questioned because of its surrender at the speed of light during World War II, it changed from a Gallic rooster to a positive white flag in Europe. But as a European legend that gave birth to Louis XIV and Na Uang, France still has its own arrogance. Especially after the man named Charles de Gaulle came to power, France held its head high and shouted for the establishment of a great and independent France. However, in the 30 years of He Dong and 30 years of Hexi, Western Europe at this time is no longer the 18th century, and President Charles de Gaulle is not Emperor Napoleon. Obviously, the United States will not take it seriously, so the two sides are not used to each other, and gradually move towards confrontation. In fact, the conflict between France and the United States existed very early, dating back to the early days of World War II. I think that after France lost to Germany, there were serious internal divisions. The Vichy government, which stayed at home, was willing to be a puppet of Germany and contributed money and efforts to fascism, while de Gaulle took Free France into exile overseas and insisted on resisting Germany and fighting guerrillas. Logically speaking, the United States should stand with Charles de Gaulle's Free France. But the reality is that the United States and the Vichy government have maintained diplomatic relations for a long time, and the trade exchanges between the two sides can be said to be very close. At that time, the Free France led by Charles de Gaulle was in opposition to the Vichy government, which indirectly affected the business between the United States and Vichy France. Therefore, not only are they not recognized by the United States, but they also have to suffer from exclusion from the United States. Although Free France later succeeded in successfully inheriting the reunification and came together with the United States by virtue of its victory in World War II, the United States is still somewhat dissatisfied with this disobedient ally. So that in many things, the United States treats France unequally. For example, in the case of NATO, France and the United Kingdom and the United States are also one of the founding members of NATO, but they are not qualified to participate in the core issues of decision-making. Because everything is due to the collusion between Britain and the United States, even if France expresses its position, it is only a fart, and the final result can only be seconded. In addition, France clearly has the strongest military power in the Mediterranean, but usually the warships of the United States and Britain can be freely disposed of in the Mediterranean, while French warships are under the unified management of NATO. If France is a small country like Belgium and Luxembourg, it would be fine if it receives such treatment in NATO. After all, their strength lies there, and NATO doesn't look down on them at all. In fact, it doesn't matter much about equality and inequality, and it basically won't affect their interests. However, France is a big country, and at that time it had a national power second to the three giants. Thinking about the appearance of being a big country, but being treated by a small country, the French naturally feel uncomfortable. Especially for a tough temper like de Gaulle, who never bowed his head in front of the Germans, he was even more dissatisfied. His vision is to build a great and independent France, not to be a little brother to the Americans. So not long after de Gaulle came to power, he asked the United States to reform NATO's existing command system, asking the United Kingdom and the United States to add France to establish a leadership group composed of the three permanent five countries to be fully responsible for NATO's overall arrangements. However, the purpose of the United States to establish NATO was originally to hold Western Europe in its hands. How could it be willing to divide its own power at this time? Therefore, de Gaulle's appeal failed to get an ideal response in the end, and France's status in NATO was still not equal to that of the United States. Since the United States is unreasonable, de Gaulle is no longer polite, and began to express his protest with various practical actions. First, in 1959, France withdrew the Mediterranean fleet that originally belonged to NATO, causing NATO to lose its strongest force in the Mediterranean. In addition, France did not allow the United States to install missile launchers, store nuclear warheads, and deploy strategic bombers in France that year. Hundreds of U.S. strategic bombers originally stationed in France were forced to withdraw. Later, in 1963, France withdrew the Atlantic Fleet from NATO. At the same time, it also withdrew French officers from the NATO Mediterranean Fleet. In addition, several French Air Force squadrons affiliated to NATO were also withdrawn. Since then, France's sea and air forces in NATO have been almost completely evacuated, leaving only an empty shell. By 1965, France simply didn't even want to save face, and directly absent from NATO's strategic military exercises. However, in the face of France's pressing step by step, the United States still does not let go. Perhaps they felt that France could not do without them. After all, the bipolar structure of Europe was there, and it was impossible for France to defect to the Soviet Union and abandon itself. Little did they know that France at this time didn't want to be someone's younger brother at all, but to establish a new European structure on its own. Looking at the French diplomatic operations in those years, whether it was getting closer to the Soviet Union or establishing diplomatic relations with China, they all showed their ambition to go solo. Of course, ambition alone is not enough, the key is to have that strength. In the 1960s, France's national strength ushered in rapid development, and it showed great strength in various fields. Economically, GDP growth is getting stronger year by year. Politically, Charles de Gaulle's charm is unparalleled, and militarily, he even tinkered with nuclear weapons. With these arrogant family backgrounds, France has the courage to leave NATO. In 1966, Charles de Gaulle announced that France would formally withdraw from the NATO military integration system, and demanded that NATO troops, bases, and various offices in France be withdrawn within a time limit. As a result, the NATO headquarters was moved to Brussels, while the US military was driven to the next door, and the stars and stripes of the US military could no longer be seen on French territory. Although France still retains its status as a member of NATO at this time, it can no longer enjoy NATO's military protection, and of course it does not need to bear NATO's shared defense. It can be regarded as achieving military independence. Of course, this was only the first step of France's solo flight. France immediately joined 5 countries including Germany, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Italy, and Belgium to establish the European Community, and this European Community was the predecessor of the European Union. France hopes to counter the influence of the United States in Western Europe through the economic and political alliance of Western European countries, and the European Union has indeed fulfilled such a mission. It is worth mentioning that in order to ensure that Western European countries can have sufficient unity in the fight against the United States, France even rejected the British application for membership many times, because although the United Kingdom is in Europe, it has never been with Europe. They are not of one mind. And the performance of Britain later proved the foresight of France. All in all, in the era when all Western Europe was willing to be a kneeling family, France acted as the exception. Not only did they not bow to the United States, they also prevented Western Europe from going astray. For the United States, which aims to unify Western Europe, France is undoubtedly a hateful stumbling block. Therefore, the United States and France have not established a good relationship for a long time. Even after France returned to NATO in 2009, the United States still does not regard France as its own. After all, from the acquisition of Alstom to preventing Australia from buying submarines, the United States has staggered France in recent years. France is also sober about the long-standing hostility of the United States. They understand that if they want the United States to fully accept France, unless the Gauls give up French and speak English. So there is no place to stay here, but there is a place to stay. After all, France is still strong today. In terms of economy, France is the 7th largest economy in the world, with a GDP close to $3 trillion. In terms of military, France ranks first in Western Europe in terms of conventional military power, with a mature and independent military industry system, and even has nuclear weapons. In terms of politics, France is one of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations. 1. It has global influence. It is not an exaggeration to say that in terms of comprehensive strength, there are very few countries in the world that can stabilize France. At most there are only 3 ceiling levels that do not talk about martial arts. Therefore, France should continue to adhere to liberalism in the future, lead Europe to be independent, and not be someone else's younger brother. If France can do it, then there will be no European flag in this world, only the Gallic rooster. The education system has intensive accidents. What signal is it releasing? Recently, the negative news about teachers has been released intensively, which makes people feel an illusion. It is said that the experts are not good enough. Is it true that the People's Teacher Group has also collapsed? On May 23, a teacher in Wuhan ran over a primary school student with a car in the school and caused his death, which aroused public opinion. The mother of the deceased accused the murderer live-streamed. On May 25, Yang Mumua, Deputy Secretary of Guangxi University of Science and Technology, Deputy Department level, crashed into a car after drinking and escaped into the women's restroom, and was arrested by relevant departments on the spot. On May 26, Guangzhou's girl accidentally touched the teacher's hand and was kicked and dragged into the classroom, topped the list of hot searches. For a long time, the social status of people's teachers has not been lower than that of the top performers in China's #1 national examination. The provisions issued in various places have also legally protected the income of teachers not lower than that of local civil servants. Coupled with the 2 long holidays every year, it can be said that the teacher can be called the proud son of heaven. However, the recent frequent thunderstorms related to local economic events, Nanning Huibo, Kunming Qingtu, Hangzhou Ali, etc., revealed the tightness of local finances. The financial problem has spread to the teacher community. On May 17, a statement about the wage arrears of a middle school in Handan broke out on the internet. It is understood that in order to ask for salary, the teachers of the school chose to use the future of the students in the school as a bet on the eve of the college entrance examination to put pressure on the school to force the school to comply. A WeChat group chat record related to the incident shows that the teachers also seemed to be forced. It can only be said that for many things, we cannot simply think that people's hearts have changed or the world has changed. Take the teacher in Guangzhou as an example. When a student touched his stomach, he beat him ruthlessly. If the parents of the students are present, they will never let you go, right? This is typical bullying. Some netizens also said, "Is this teacher pregnant, and is eager to protect her child?" So, even if the teacher is really pregnant, your child is a human being, but someone else's child is not a human being? What's more, you are a pregnant woman who looks at your mobile phone instead of the road while walking, and fights when people accidentally touch you. Is this the image of a people's teacher? Confucius said, "A person with lofty ideals and benevolent people should not harm benevolence in order to save their lives, but should sacrifice their lives to achieve benevolence. Forget death to protect righteousness." You see, even educators thousands of years ago would not recognize this teacher in a civilized society. Besides, the teachers in Handan, even if they don't pay wages, use the future of the students as a bet. What is the difference between this effect and the fact that Cathay Pacific's flight attendants discriminate against mainland passengers, while its labor unions say things like high pressure and declining wages? Admittedly, with the recent environment like this, people's hearts have also become impetuous. The ghosts start to sneak. The crisis is the turning point, and only the true brave can seize the opportunity in this great change unseen in a century.